There are around 2.3 billion Android smartphones currently under circulation, shared by over 1,000 manufacturers. It is evident that most of them have certain differences on both hardware and software levels, but every device has one thing in common, and that is the Linux kernel.
Hello, this is Linus Torvalds and I pronounce Linux as Linux.
Linus Torvalds is credited for making the Linux kernel, but the inspiration was derived from somewhere else. History is never subtle to men who make an impact. There were a lot of innovations that went into the creation of modern day Linux. Some stories transcend time, space and age. This is the story of Linux. It does involve an amazing starcast who were instrumental in creating the historical snapshots that we study in the books on operating systems.
The heart of the center is this IBM 7090 high-speed general-purpose digital computer. Experimentation is underway to develop a new technique of computer usage called time sharing. Hundreds of people will one day be able to use tomorrow's computer simultaneously.
Computing in the 60s was much different to what we have today. The programmers used to deliver the outputs on punch cards that used to store digits, letters and special characters. A block of punch cards used to make up a function, and blocks of functions used to make up a program, which was delivered to operators who used to manually input and output the cards, leaving CPU idle for a long time. In case you fell while delivering the punch cards, it sure would have been a nightmare. And to avoid that, a diagonal line was marked to make your life easy. The 60s operating system gold rush was time sharing. The key idea proposed was to reduce the CPU idle time by restricting each job execution for a fixed time interval. John McCarthy, the father of artificial intelligence, conceived the idea in late 1950s. However, it was Kobato who actually worked on it and made it practical. Dick Leider convinced ARPA for a $3 million funding, which was received in the year 1963, and the project was named Mac. In 1964, MIT, General Electric and Bell Labs would come together to work on Multisk's operating system, which was a very ambitious project. From 1967 to 69, there was a growing concern from Bell Labs, as stated by the chief Sam Morgan, on how mismanaged Multisk project was. The development was slow and sometimes pointless. Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson also left the project Multisk during the same time. In a paper written by Dennis, he mentions that how unsettling the duration was and how Multisks had failed to deliver a usable system. From the ashes of Multisks, Ken and Dennis saw an opportunity to make a much simpler time-shared operating system. 1969 is when Unix was born.
We were trying to make computing as simple as possible. In the late 1960s, Dennis Ritchie and I realized that the then current operating systems were much too complex. We attempted to reverse this trend by building a small, simple operating system on a mini-computer.
Well, what we wanted to preserve was not just a good programming environment in which to do programming, but a system around which a community could form.
1970s is when things started happening for Bell Labs. In 1972, Dennis Ritchie made a programming language which we now know as C, derived from a typeless language BCPL. In 1973, the world got to know about Unix for the first time. The paper highlighted Unix as a general-purpose operating system. They sure did receive a lot of appreciation, but because of a lawsuit they were facing, Bell Labs could not make Unix a product. But they could still sell the licenses to a lot of institutes with a hefty cost of $200,000. In the same year, Bell Labs would open Unix up for universities, which would also be a flashpoint in the history of Unix operating system. A lot of modifications led to a lot of variants of Unix, but there was no standard in place. Two of the best emerging operating systems were one from AT&T and other from Berkeley. Since the license was too expensive, other people were working on making a Unix-like system and release it as an open source. In 1984, Richard Stallman started the GNU project. In 1987, Andrew Tannenbaum made Minix for educational purposes. Somewhere in July 1990, at the University of Helsinki, a Finnish master student studying computer science got frustrated by the fact that the computer that they were using could accommodate only 16 people at a time, and took inspiration from Minix and started working on his own kernel. Little did he know that his pastime project would become something that would go on into almost all of the world's supercomputers. On August 25, 1991, he shot an email in the Minix user community.
Hello everybody out there using Minix. I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU, for 386 and 486 AT clones. This has been brewing since April and is starting to get ready. I'd like any feedback on things people like or dislike in Minix, as my OS resembles it somewhat. Any suggestions are welcome, but I won't promise I'll actually implement them.
With Minix being educational and Herd being not optimal, Linux was a great fit to the GNU environment, so open sourcing only made sense.
Torvalds' decision to distribute Linux for free and reveal its underlying source code has made him a quasi-cult figure.
This is a huge project. There has never been a software project that I know of that's been worked on by so many people from so many dispersed places to put this all together.
The most innovative thing about the Linux community is not its source code, but the social machine that has developed around the source code.
Linux, an operating system that now runs 8 million of the world's computers.
But Linux also had luck by its side. When Linux was getting traction, the University of Berkeley's computer science department was facing an actual lawsuit from Bell Labs, which kept the BSD version of Unix from exploding. "29 years and counting. As more people become aware about operating systems and Linux in general, it is time to acknowledge that Linux shows what humans are capable of doing if they coordinate and work in organized groups. Kudos to the Linux Foundation and more power to you."